Hello, everyone. This is Live Life Well TV host Robert Landau, and this is another episode in our series here on Live Life Well TV on America's Greatest Personalities. Each week, each episode, we take a look at another American great who was a role model in a number of areas. This episode, it's my pleasure to talk to you about the great Cary Grant, somebody that not only was always mindful about being true to himself, but someone who was always in search of himself, and that search never ended. Cary Grant, folks, was known for many things, but one of them was the fact that he absolutely hated to be in the spotlight. And of course, that was something that his chosen career was very much a part of. Those that knew him best were always aware that he was an intensely private man who, as I alluded to before, always seemed to be in search of himself. He also hated to give interviews, and to that end, very rarely did so. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to share a lot of the words that he did say whenever he allowed himself to be that candid. My goal is to always present information about, in this case, Cary Grant, that you might not have known before, that will enhance your memory and knowledge of him. I'd like to concentrate mostly on Cary Grant, the man behind the Hollywood personality, the man behind the screen legend. But we'll talk a little bit about his career too. So I'd like to start off with a question. Why do you think Cary Grant was so successful as a true Hollywood legend? Some of it may have to do with his childhood, his unhappy childhood. Archibald Alec Leach, an only child, was born on January 18th, 1904 in Bristol, England. His father, Elias Leach, worked as a tailor's presser. His mother, Elsie, whose first son had died in infancy, was known to be overprotective and allegedly mentally unstable. When Archie was only 9 years old, he was told that his mother was being taken to a seaside resort. That was in the spring of 1914, and what he didn't know was that his father, Elias, had his mother, Elsie, committed to a mental institution. Archie was never told where his mother was really taken and would not see her again, get this, for no less than 26 years. Of this, he would say, "There was a void in my life, a sadness of spirit that affected each daily activity with which I occupied myself in order to overcome it. But there was no further explanation of mother's absence, and I gradually got accustomed to the fact that she was not home each time I came home. Nor, it transpired, was she expected to ever come home. I was not to see my mother again for more than 20 years, by which time my name was changed and I was a full-grown man living in America, thousands of miles away in California. I was known to most people of the world by sight and by name, yet not to my mother." Suffice it to say that Grant had an unhappy childhood in which he became more insecure as each day would pass. He would end up ignoring his studies in school when he realized that craving applause and creating a character he could hide behind to receive the adulation that he couldn't get otherwise became more important to him than anything. He has said this: I probably chose my profession because I was seeking approval, adulation, admiration, and affection, each a degree of love. Perhaps no child ever feels the recipient of enough love to satisfy him or her. Oh, how we secretly yearn for it, yet openly defend against it. Without the ability to fully love or be loved, he goes on to say, so many of us think that the acquisition of money can bring self-esteem and happiness. I have enjoyed friendship with some exceedingly wealthy people. If money brought happiness, each of them should be ecstatically happy. But I doubt whether any of them happen to be any happier than the rest of my less well-to-do friends. Money, it seems, attracts more envy than empathy, more lust than love. In fact, Archie would end up craving applause more so than wanting to stay in school, and ended up being expelled due to an alleged incident having to do with the girls' restroom when he was 14. To his joy, Archie would soon find that he had an opportunity to join something called Bob Pender's traveling troupe of comedians. He was too young to join, but he was going to do it anyway. Archie lied about his age and forged his father's signature on a letter, and lo and behold, he was now a member of something called Bob Pender's troupe. This was a popular vaudeville type show that would tour the British countryside. The show really became a hit when it played in London, so much so that Bob Pender found himself having to pick 8 members of his troupe to go to the States because something called Broadway was calling. Archie was one of the 8 that was chosen to go to the States in July of 1920, and it would be an understatement to say that he was absolutely excited and totally overjoyed. Of Grant's first transatlantic crossing, he said this: in July of 1920, we sailed for America on the SS Olympic. Among the fellow passengers were newlyweds Douglas Fairbanks Sr. and Mary Pickford, the world's most popular honeymooners and the first film stars I ever met. They were gracious and patient in the face of constant harassment by people with cameras and autograph books whenever they would appear on deck. And even once I found myself being photographed with Mr. Fairbanks during a game of shuffleboard. As I stood beside him, I tried with shy, inadequate words to tell him of my adulation while I was just standing beside him. He was a splendidly trained athlete and acrobat, affable and warmed by success and well-being, a gentleman in the true sense of the word, a gentle man. Only a strong man can be gentle, and it suddenly dawns on me that as this is being written, I've doggedly striven to keep tanned ever since, only because of a desire to emulate his healthful appearance. Bob Pender's show was a major success on Broadway. It would play for no less than 426 performances. After the show closed, when the rest of the troupe went back to the UK, Archie stayed. To support himself in those early days, he took on many odd jobs. He would end up touring America, though, in various vaudeville shows. Great experience to play vaudeville because you do about 4 to 8 shows a day, every day. And when you finish playing that city, you go to the next city and do the same, and so on and so on and so forth. Soon, he would find himself back on the Broadway stage once again, playing some light comedic roles, but these shows never proved to be very successful. In 1931, Archie figured it was about time to see if he could make it in Hollywood. He had managed to purchase a car, loaded it up with some items and names that were given to him as contacts, and drove across America towards the bright and hopefully promising lights of Hollywood. Upon his arrival, Archibald Alec Leach became Cary Grant. Along with his new name, a contract at MGM would arrive after a very successful screen test. As they say, the rest is history. No need to go through each one of Grant's films, but suffice it to say that many believe that Cary Grant was one of the greatest comedic actors Hollywood has ever produced. And maybe he wasn't funny, but his sophisticated charm and incredible timing put his timeless looks into the mix, and all of that would make him a true Hollywood legend. He would end up making over 70 motion pictures with such co-stars as Katharine Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe, Mae West, Ingrid Bergman, and Grace Kelly in memorable films such as Bringing Up Baby, Topper, The Awful Truth, and The Philadelphia Story. When Grant was asked which leading lady happened to have been his favorite to work with, this is how he would respond. I've worked with many fine actresses, but in my opinion, the best actress I ever worked with was Grace Kelly. Ingrid, Audrey, and Deborah Kerr were splendid actresses, but Grace was utterly relaxed, the most extraordinary actress ever. Her mind was razor keen, but she was relaxed while she was doing it. I really appreciate that. It's not an easy profession, despite what most people think. The Philadelphia Story was the film that established Grant's screen persona. A charming, if sometimes unreliable man, formerly married to an intelligent and strong-willed woman who divorced him, then realized he was, with all his faults, absolutely irresistible. So what he did was take this character from that film and just refashioned it a bit depending on what future film he would find himself in. When asked how he responded to criticism that he never portrayed anyone but himself in films, Grant would say, well, who else could I portray? I can't portray Bing Crosby. I'm Cary Grant. I'm myself in that role. Actually, the most difficult thing is to be yourself, especially when you know it's going to be seen immediately by no less than 300 million people. Grant's greatest collaborator was probably none other than the amazing Alfred Hitchcock, with whom he made North by Northwest, Notorious, and To Catch a Thief. Get this, To Catch a Thief was filmed in Monaco with Grace Kelly. In one scene, Grant was a passenger in a car being driven recklessly around a mountain by Ms. Kelly. In, as you might remember, 1982, Grace Kelly would die tragically while driving recklessly on the very same mountain. The notorious Hitchcock, who among other things absolutely hated actors, said of Cary Grant, "He is the only actor I ever loved in my whole life." And get this, Ian Fleming has all but admitted that he partially had Cary Grant in mind when he created his suave super spy, James Bond. Sean Connery would end up getting the role because of his uncanny resemblance at the time to Cary Grant. Not only that, but Roger Moore, who also played the role of James Bond after Connery, was also selected for the role because of his very wry sense of humor and lightheartedness that he brought to the movie role, but all in the energy of Cary Grant. Grant was nominated for an Academy Award twice, but never won. He was given an Academy Award in 1970 for Lifetime Achievement, and in 1981 he was also presented with the prestigious Kennedy Center Honors. Cary Grant would stop making films altogether in 1966, but he never stopped working. He sat on the board of MGM, but he also sat on the board of Fabergé Cosmetics. Grant had become a naturalized US citizen back in 1942. And as you probably already know by now, there was always a tremendous amount of gossip and hearsay when it had to do with Cary Grant off the screen. And that kind of still is very much the case. Back in 1936, on the set of a film called Hot Saturday, Grant met actor Randolph Scott. The two would end up living together in the same house for no less than 12 years. Was this more than a friendship? Some say yes, others say no. Nevertheless, Cary Grant was married to Virginia Cheryl, Barbara Hutton, Betsy Drake, Diane Cannon, and Barbara Harris. All of these marriages would unfortunately end in divorce. That might lead you to ask the question, who really was Cary Grant? We may never really know, as those who were closest to him only knew for sure. So much has been said about Grant, such as a screenwriter who worked with Grant towards the end of his career said of the actor, like a house on the back lot of a Hollywood studio, enormously impressive from the front, but when you open the door, you realize there is nothing behind it. Yikes. Famous Hollywood director Billy Wilder had this to say about Grant: "I don't know anyone who's been inside his house in the last 10 years. Or David Niven, one of Cary's closest friends, who once said that Grant is truly the most mysterious friend that I have. He has great depressions and great heights where he seems about to take off for outer space." And the great Doris Day once said, "He looks into your eyes, not your forehead or your hair, as some people do. He can make love to me when I'm 90. Many speculate that the departure of Cary's mother at such an early age left a permanent scar in his emotional psyche, all of which manifested into sometimes odd behavior, such as the alleged habit of manipulating and controlling many of the women that were closest to him. For example, he would allegedly dictate what clothing they were to wear, they were not to wear makeup, they were to act demurely, and never to talk about him in front of others. And yet, at the very same time, many also speculate that he was actually frightened of women, thus his constant need to want to control them. Many also say that Grant was extremely cautious with money. If you were lucky enough to go to dinner with him, he would always suggest going Dutch. When the bill would be presented, he would examine it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that he wasn't being taken advantage of. And listen to this true story that happened to him while he was staying at New York City's Plaza Hotel. I love this. Grant had ordered coffee and English muffins, muffins being plural, to be sent up to his room for breakfast. When they arrived, he all at once noticed that there were only 3 half slices, or 1/2 slice less than 2 for his English muffin order. He said, I asked the waiter why, and he didn't know. I called the head of room service, who also didn't know. I went up the line, and nobody could explain. So Cary telephoned the hotel's owner, which happened to have been Conrad Hilton in Beverly Hills, but Grant said, his office told me that he was in Istanbul. Undetermined, Grant then telephoned Hilton in Istanbul to ask why he had been brought only 3 half slices of English muffin at the Plaza in New York when the menu clearly stated muffins. Conrad knew the answer, Grant said. It seems as if a hotel efficiency expert had decreed that all guests left the 4th slice of muffin on their plate. As a plate cleaner upper, Cary said, I was appalled to hear that, as he proceeded to tell Hilton that he should immediately alter the menu to read muffin and a half. He said, it cost me several $100s in phone calls, but ever since, I have always gotten 4 slices of muffin whenever I stay at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. It is also said that the actor never trusted success. Grant feared that each new movie wouldn't make it and often fretted over insignificant details which would only end up turning off and alienating big-wig studio execs. The disparity he thought existed between who he was on screen and the emotional, abandoned little boy that grew up in spite of himself and on the screen was something he would try to understand and reconcile. Some say the actor believed that people only loved Cary Grant, but not Archibald Alec Leach. To this end, he tried psychotherapy, yoga, hypnotherapy, mysticism, fad diets, and even experimented with LSD. Yes, LSD was legal at the time and could be used as a tool to understand and unlock deep-seated psychological issues during the therapeutic process. On the subject of autograph hounds, he has said the following: except for children, whose requests I try to fulfill whenever practical, the people I would like most to know are those inclined to approach me. I am often confronted by the aggressive type, unfortunately. Their tactless trespassing as I lift a fork to mouth is accompanied with remarks such as, my children will kill me if I don't bring home your autograph. Or, my wife won't believe I saw you if I don't get your signature, Mr. Grant. Such opening gambits trouble me about the status of their family relationships, and I get indigestion and I burp. He said, it has been written that I am rude to autograph seekers. That's not true. I am rude only to rude autograph seekers. The great Cary Grant would leave this world quite suddenly on November 29th, 1986. He was 82 years of age. He would pass due to a massive stroke in his hotel room while on tour with his one-man show in Davenport, Iowa. Within 48 hours, his remains were flown back to California and cremated. There was no funeral, there was no memorial, and that was just how he had wanted it. Whether Archibald Leach ever became comfortable with Cary Grant, we may never know. All the gossip and dark stories surrounding Grant are simply that, just stories. Are they true? Are they false? Does it really matter? Simply because what this genius of a man who took himself from rags to riches is really all about is what is important. The gentle power of the human spirit to succeed. And then to realize that success sometimes comes with a lot of dark attachments. Could Archibald Leach ever have merged into one with Cary Grant? You know the saying, God never gives us more than we can handle? Maybe this was indeed true with Cary Grant. Could it be that his lesson in life was to learn that the two were really one and had been so all along? It was just now up to him to effectively manage those two. In closing, the great Cary Grant once said, "It's been a glorious adventure up to here, even the saddest parts, and I look forward to seeing the rest of the film." Just as I did in 1932, when I sat in that Paramount studio office, I took up the pen and wrote for the first time, Cary Grant. And that's who it seems I am. Well, as some profound fellow once said, I'd be a nut to go through all that again, but I wouldn't have missed it for anything. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a bit of the amazing life journey of the amazing Cary Grant. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This has been Robert Landau, Live Life Well TV host, with another episode of America's Greatest Personalities. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in.